Joining me right now are Vlad Grenkov and Samp from Pixel Machinery in Boston.
Hello.
Hi,
Oh,
how are you doing?
doing pretty well. It's hot.
It's
but
very
it's
warm.
good.
How are you?
Okay, so tell us about the volunteer work you're doing during this quarantine.
Vlad, do you want to start?
Sure. So I somehow found myself with 3 3D printers. The first one we bought for making costumes. And then I came across Joseph Prusa's the maker of the printer from Czech Republic. And they released very quickly a design for a print for a 3D face shield. And I'm like, oh, let's make these. So I started printing them, and yeah.
And we kept printing them. And then our company, we just happen to have some clients that work in healthcare. So we have contact with a lot of people who work in the healthcare industry.
Yep.
And we were telling them about this project, and they were like, oh, can we get some? And
Yeah.
so then it started to get to the point where we realized that, like, we could print a lot of these and that it was getting very expensive for us. So we started a GoFundMe where people could donate money, and then we would use that money to buy materials to print more masks. And the more money that we got, we would just use it all to create masks, or face shields.
Yep.
And it just took off. We made a couple $1,000, and we're just churning out the face shields and donating them to doctors and nurses and EMTs and anyone who works in a field where they are a frontline worker coming into contact with COVID-19 patients.
Yep.
Uh-huh. So you're telling me people can donate money right now for this?
Yes, they can if they want to. Our GoFundMe is, I guess we would have to send you a link. Yeah, link here.
The link will appear on the bottom of the screen.
A link below. But yeah, I mean, we're going to keep printing them as long as doctors need them. So, there's no real end point in sight. We just keep going until they tell us to stop.
And if anyone watching needs any, send a message and we can send you some.
Yeah.
Perfect. So what types of products are you making for the hospitals?
So we are making one product, and this is it. Here, this is a better example. So this is called a face shield. It's a medical face shield, and it's made out of plastic.
3D printed plastic.
Yeah, 3D printed plastic, and then translucent plastic, and then it has an elastic, and you put it on like this.
Your head is too
fancy.
Oh no, it's fine.
Yep. And this is what people working with COVID-19 patients wear to prevent infection. They would wear it with a mask as well. So they would wear a face mask and then the face shield on top of it. And lots of people have been donating face masks, and the sort of the other piece of protective equipment that's really important for the face is the face shield.
So are you expanding into colors, or are they all in white?
Well, we have white, we have orange.
It's whatever colors we had on.
Sometimes we have multicolors.
When you have to switch. So Prusa is actually, they released a cheaper version of their filaments in their color, so we've been buying from them.
Yeah, it's basically whatever we get our hands on, because sometimes the actual filament for the 3D printer is sold out. So if it's available, we don't care what color.
Yep.
Hey, I'm all for bringing colors into hospitals.
I know.
Agreed.
When we have a mixture, I like to put one of each into a pack.
Those places sometimes seem scary.
Yeah, and a little bit like white and light blue. This is the color scheme we see all the time.
Yep.
Okay, so what was the situation in hospitals when you started? What was it like?
Okay, so when we first started, we started this at the end of March, I believe. Right at the end of March was when we started this project. And that was the point at which New York in particular was in a really bad situation. They had overwhelmed intensive care units, overwhelmed emergency rooms, and not only were they overwhelmed with patients, on top of it, the doctors and nurses and other workers did not have the protective gear that they needed. And we were hearing news reports and just anecdotal stories with things like people saying, I had to wear the same face mask for 2 weeks in a row. You know, face masks that are supposed to be one-time use.
There was a Boston Globe article of how emergency room physician her husband had to make her one of these shields from a Coca-Cola bottle.
Yeah, so people wearing like really rigged together homemade shields that didn't at all meet requirements. Like they probably weren't keeping them that safe, but it was better than nothing. So that was the situation when we started. Things are a little bit better now because people have been donating a lot, and in most situations the number of patients is starting to decrease in most areas. But it's still a problem. Like we still have doctors asking us for supplies.
Yeah, I noticed it's like smaller organizations are starting to ask more, and the bigger hospitals are almost supplied better because, you know, quite a lot of people are doing this all over the world. Last week we sent a few dozen to a nonprofit in Maine that does free dental work for homeless people, and they had nothing. So
yeah, that's true. I think smaller organizations suffer because nobody knows that they have a need.
Right.
So yeah, we're hitting both. We've done huge hospitals in New York. We've done small dental clinics in Maine, and everything in between.
So you're all over the Northeast then?
Actually, all over the East Coast. We've been sending stuff to Atlanta and Florida as well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So, what materials do you use to make the masks?
So there's 3 main ingredients, so to speak. Material number 1. Thank you. So material number 1 is this is the filament that goes into the 3D printer, and that creates these pieces that go along the top and the bottom. The white pieces here. It's purple here. And then the second material is plastic sheeting like this. This actually,
we can't
sorry,
use these.
this was one we can't use because it wasn't translucent enough. We have gone through quite a bit of trial and error with the materials.
It's important to see in a hospital.
So the problem is this plastic, the clear one. There's a shortage of it now, and we're having trouble sourcing it. So I've ordered from several different sites and just canceled, delayed. So we've been waiting on a shipment for 800 masks for 2 months now.
Yeah.
And they just got back to me today saying it should be here in a week, but I've heard that before. So.
Yeah, so that's the material number 2 is the translucent plastic, and then material number 3 is the elastic that goes around so that it attaches to your head. And we have about 800 yards of this elastic. So yeah, Vlad actually brought up an interesting point, which is the struggles that we've had with sourcing materials, in particular the translucent plastic for the front. We've had to get pretty creative and order from a lot of different places just to keep up with the demand for masks.
Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how you make a face shield.
So you're having trouble ordering them, and some of the materials there's a shortage of?
Correct, yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people are ordering it.
Yeah, so you see it everywhere, like convenience stores, grocery stores. Everyone's building those sneeze guards from the same material. Oh, sorry. Building sneeze guards and cubicles from this material. So sold out almost everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, we've been able to find what we need to like keep up with the demand, but once we get in our big order that we've been waiting for more than a month, we won't be worried anymore. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. So what has the response from the doctors been like?
it's been overwhelmingly good.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
so grateful.
Yeah. It's kind of humbling actually, because like having a doctor who's like basically doing a hero's work right now, going in and putting their own life at risk. Like, I'm not putting my life at risk doing this. We're happy to do it. And to have a doctor like
It could explode.
to have a doctor thank me is like so humbling, and I almost don't know what to say.
Yeah.
When they say like, "Oh, thank you so much," I'm like, "Thank you."
Yeah.
You know.
I didn't expect it. I didn't expect people to want these. It was just like, hey, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna print a couple of dozen. I asked, like, oh yes, we need all of them.
Yeah.
And then at some point, I printed enough that we spent like $500 on top. And then I said, all right, let's do a quick GoFundMe to just recoup it. And then I set it at 500 and
it went way over.
yeah, it went.
Yeah.
So.
But it's been really amazing. Like, we've gotten really great pictures of, the residents wearing them.
Mm-hmm.
Just really great feedback that like, even little things, like I got a compliment that like, oh, the elastic is adjustable so it doesn't hurt my head. Thank you so much. Stuff like that.
Because JJ has the thick 1-inch one.
Yeah, so it's been really good, and people have been asking for more.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. So how are you distributing the mass? Did you run into any troubles there, or?
Not with getting them where they needed to go. Once we knew where they needed to go, it was easy. We ship them up. So what we do is we ship them not assembled, and they come with assembly instructions that are pretty easy. And we put them in sealable bags, and we mark the date that they were sealed. And that's a reasonably safe way to, guarantee that as long as you're opening it 3 or 4 days after the seal date, it's not going to have any contagion in it. And they're also, when they arrive, we've instructed people to just wipe them down with Lysol. They're pretty easily disinfected because they are all plastic. So the logistics of packing them and shipping them has been really easy. The surprising challenge has been figuring out where and to whom to send them. We had a couple of surprising experiences where we would reach out to hospitals, like the sort of the organization of the hospital, and say, hey, we're making these, do you need them? And they would come back to us and say, no, we're all set. And then I would get in contact with, say, a nurse who worked at the same hospital, who was actually on the ground, and I would get a very different answer from the nurse.
Send anything.
Like, basically the nurse would say, oh God, no, please send us stuff. We have nothing. So we were getting these two really different responses from the institution versus the individual. And essentially what we started doing was like, look, the nurses and the doctors are the ones doing the work here. We trust them. So we started sending them directly to doctors and nurses so that they could take and distribute amongst their colleagues. And we found that to be a lot more reliable than trusting the hospitals who, and I quote from a doctor whose name I will not name, the hospitals care more about their reputation and liability at this point. Even at this point, they still care enough about that at least as of a month ago, they were willing to put their own doctors and nurses at risk before accepting homemade goods.
Yeah, I asked a few in the beginning, doctors, like, should I send these to the hospital directly? Like, no, send them to me. I'll take care of it.
Yeah.
Don't send them there.
So that was really interesting and kind of disturbing.
Yeah. No, everything's under control. Don't worry.
Good. Well, I just have to thank you for the amazing work you're doing. And if any doctors or nurses want to contact you to get face masks, how would they go about doing that?
So if you put the GoFundMe link, our emails are right on the GoFundMe. So you can just email us.
Yeah.
my email is jj@pixelmachinery.com. His is Vlad@pixelmachinery.com. Yeah, our inboxes are open. Like, we'll get you what you need. No problem.
Good. That's great. Let's shift now to something that is really interesting to me, which is 3D printing in itself. So how and why did you become a 3D printer?
Well, I guess
Because I never want to buy a house.
we like spending money on toys, number one. Number two, I don't know if you can see these heads with wigs on them behind here, but this is part of me and Vlad's other hobby, cosplay, where we dress up as like comic book, video game, and anime characters and go crazy and create all sorts of insane costumes. And part of that is making props. Like, if you've ever watched an anime or played a video game, you see that these characters oftentimes have really cool props. And one of the best ways to make the props exactly the way you want them is to 3D print them. So that's how we fell into 3D printing. Ironically, we bought it for the purpose of making props for costumes. I would say we've probably printed way more random household items like flower pots and hooks.
Yeah.
Like, we've actually ended up using it not for costumes. But that was how we got started, and then actually there's this whole world of 3D printing, creative sharing culture. And once our eyes were open to that, we ended up getting into like lots of other stuff.
So basically what you're saying, bottom line, is that anime saves lives, right?
You know, it wouldn't be completely incorrect. You could say that. A little bit of a stretch maybe, but it got us there.
Every life ever saved is because of anime.
Yeah.
Good enough for me.
Yep.
So, can anyone become a 3D printer, even say a stuffed bear?
Do you have opposable thumbs? Those are useful.
I don't even have fingers, so
I think
enough.
maybe if you teamed up with a friend who could just help you get the filament
Yeah.
into the 3D printer.
oh yeah, I can just ask the guy I live with.
Perfect.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
how could I get into this 3D printing phenomenon?
You should get a 3D printer. So the ones that we have.
Here, well, we'll do a zoom in on our 3D printers. We love the ones that we have. We highly recommend this company, Prusa. They're really, really cool. Like, they kind of embody the spirit of 3D printing. They're just really nerdy and creative, and they like share all open source stuff. And so this is the Prusa, is it the i3?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the latest Prusa model that we have. Yeah, they're a Czech-based company, and they're spectacular.
Yeah, there's a great video that they posted about the history of the company, and Joseph Prusa was a DJ, and he needed knobs for his equipment, and then he ran across this open source project, like, oh, I can print my own knobs, and then he realized the printer wasn't good enough, so he started making changes to the design, publishing it, and now they're
Yeah, I mean, really,
hundreds and hundreds.
the printer itself is expensive, but once you buy the printer, that's like the only thing you need to buy. You just have to buy the filament.
Yeah.
But like, it's pretty much just the one thing, and then the material. So
Yeah, and so yeah, these are $700 or $800. You can buy other companies. Ender makes cheap ones. You know, this has nice features, but you don't need them. You can get a $130 printer to get you started, and
yeah, you
You're
just
familiar?
buy it and start printing. And what I've learned, because Vlad's the 3D printing expert, not me, but I've obviously learned a little bit about them through this whole process, is that you just have to start printing, and then you'll like start to know the machine,
Yep.
and you'll start to understand how it works. And it looks intimidating because it looks like a robot that's moving all by itself, which it basically kind of is.
Yeah.
But it's not that scary. You just have to start.
Uh-huh.
Very mechanical, just pushing little
Yeah.
plastic through a hole on a preset path.
Yeah. You mentioned a lot the idea of sharing blueprints. Is there a 3D printing community, and does it share models between members, or how does that work?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's very open. Hundreds of thousands of designs. Thingiverse, My Mini Factory, proofsofprinters.org, and find any pots, any hook
Yeah.
that someone already built.
There's like various websites that host communities, like the ones that Vlad mentioned, and there's just in general like this spirit of people who just want to make cool stuff and share it with other people. Like that mentality permeates the whole community. So there's like there's a huge amount of like documentation and people sharing their designs on these websites.
Yep.
Which is really cool.
So in fact, these printers, the Prusa ones, they're also open sourced, and the idea behind them is that as many of the parts for a new printer should be printed by an existing printer. So everything except for the frame, the electronics, and the rods is 3D printed. And if you go to their website, you can download it, you can print it, and you can source your own frame and not pay them. I actually calculated this, and it turns out to be more expensive to do that in terms of parts you have to buy from different places. So I'm guessing, Prusa just has a volume discount or something.
Interesting.
Very interesting. So let me ask you a question, because here in Spain, some 3D makers are creating respirators with 3D printers, but they are waiting for government approval to be used. Is there something similar happening over there in the US?
For these masks, or
No, for respirators.
respirators are like equipment like this.
Respirators. Like for the
Or in general.
the N95 respirators?
Yeah.
Or
Here in Spain, hospitals were running short on respirators, so to help people breathe.
Ventilators.
the ventilators?
Oh, ventilators. Sorry.
So the ventilators, I haven't heard. The problem is that in the US, hospitals are so concerned with liability that they would absolutely not be able to accept ventilators that were not government approved.
I imagine the European Union is even stricter, maybe?
Yeah, probably. So it would be hard to, like, I would be scared to put together ventilators not knowing that they could be used. And I haven't heard of any designs that are even close to getting approval.
Another problem I imagine is the fact that in a sense, every ventilator you're making is kind of artisanal, and you'd have to check every single one every single time to be able to use it at a hospital.
And they're a fair bit more complicated than a shield or a hook.
I mean, the stories I've heard about ventilators have been more along the lines of motor companies being diverted to create them. Hey, the second there is an approved 3D printed design, even if we can just 3D print parts to send somewhere else, that would be fantastic, and we'll totally shift some of our funds from this project to that. But so far, I haven't heard anything.
Okay. So here's another question that affected the 3D printing community a couple of years ago, which was the fact that people starting 3D printing guns that could go unnoticed by metal detectors.
What is your perspective on that whole controversy, and has it affected the 3D printing community in any way?
So as far as how it's affected the 3D printing community, First of all, you don't see 3D printed gun patterns on Thingiverse. Like
Right.
that's not something that you ever see. But like, so I'm pro gun regulation. Like I think guns should be totally regulated. And I imagine that similarly, I was talking with Vlad about this earlier, like similarly to how it's very difficult to say buy the ingredients to like make a weapon like a bomb. Like you
or even find.
you can't just buy uranium, right? So I would assume that similarly it should be regulated and very difficult to buy the blueprints to print a gun. Right. So you just have to make it extremely regulated in order to get the materials and the blueprints to make it. The same way you would regulate, the purchase of other potentially weapon building materials.
Okay.
I'm sure you can. I'm sure if you tried hard enough, you could find instructions on, say, how to build an explosive device or whatever.
Right. So then
But
you
it's
just
hard,
have to
'cause it's illegal.
regulate. You have to regulate the purchase of those materials, right?
Yeah, people shouldn't be going around.
Because if you can't find a blueprint to make a gun, then it's going to be a lot harder to make a gun. And I think that's probably the most effective way to regulate that.
And presumably, if you're crazy enough to want to print your own gun and do some crazy stuff with it, you're not smart enough to actually design it yourself.
I should hope so.
I should hope so. Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Sure.
So,
Thankfully, we do not see those patterns up on Thingiverse.
Right.
Great. That leaves this bear very, very calm. Okay, so final question to end on a high note.
people are starting to 3D print houses. I have
Ads on YouTube keep popping up.
about this thing. What do you think is the future of 3D printing, and what jobs do you think will be transformed?
Formed by the rise of 3D printing.
Vlad, do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, I would love a 3D printed house.
I would be afraid that a 3D printed house would melt.
Right. Yeah. So the ones I've seen is some sort of concrete mixture, I guess. It's just a huge version of that thing, and this certainly has some. Is that in focus? Yeah. So this certainly has some limitations because you can see the layers. It's not as precise, but
Well, the amazing thing about the 3D printing is that this is just one of many things that you can put in a 3D printer.
Right.
There are types of 3D printers that can 3D print with metal and concrete, and I assume that's how the houses are being built.
There's that chocolate one.
Yeah, like you can have kinds of 3D printers that can use food in them, so you can create shapes with chocolate and frosting and that sort of thing.
And it's amazing because for something like this, all you need is the pattern. If well designed, you can print all the prints for a new printer, and then a new printer, and then a new printer, and then once you have a pattern for something useful, you can crank out 500 or 600 face shields in the span of a month.
Right.
If we had 2 more printers, it would be double that.
I think there's some pretty amazing implications for just manufacturing and production. I mean, we work with a company that builds airplane parts with 3D printers.
Yeah.
And they're able to do it faster and cheaper than than manufacturers have in the past. So, and I mean, I actually don't know very much about this, but I would assume that there are ways to make 3D printing, manufacturing via 3D printing more environmental friendly, which is, in my opinion, extremely important for the future of our world.
Yeah, if you have a useful parts and a 3D printer, you don't have to produce it ahead of time. You just print it on demand. So if something breaks, I want this for my warehouse.
Right, it reduces lead times. There's less of a need for supply chains, because if you needed to, you could literally 3D print more 3D printers on site and then mass produce on site.
Yep.
So it's really kind of amazing, the implications for scaling and cost reduction
Get rid of some jobs.
Well, no, because it creates all these this need for people who understand how the 3D printers work.
Yeah.
And then like on just a more personal scale, like artistically and creatively, I think it's a really amazing outlet. And it's like a new form of like art combined with utility that is going to be really cool just for people's like personal creative and I don't know, just like pushing yourself personally. Like 3D printing is a really cool way to do that.
So
Yeah.
So for the kids today, what jobs do you think will be new jobs that will be created thanks to 3D printing and the rise of 3D printing?
I mean, manufacturing will change.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Design.
Yeah. So like 3D printing, like design work, the engineering that goes into creating the blueprints, like just
coding, logistics.
Yeah.
3D printing itself.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, until we can all sit back and have the robots do it for us.
Well,
that'd be a dream.
It's like Star Trek, replicators.
I know, it is like replicators.
Well, Vlad and JJ, thanks a lot for being on the first episode of this weird show. Thanks for
Our pleasure.
Absolutely.
keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.